This video contains spoilers. You might want to read the series in question before watching this review. With Endgame coming out soon, I wanted to go back and talk about all of the original Thanos stories that inspired the films, and interrogate why Thanos as a character has become so popular. Personally speaking, he's one of my favorite characters in comics, and I've been planning on shining a light on his history and what makes him so unique. Specifically, I want to start with his first appearances today, and work all the way up through the Infinity Gauntlet story, sharing the first 20 or so years of his character development. Many comics have a consistent creative team for at least a little while, a consistent writer, possibly collaborating with a single artist for at least a whole story arc or decent period of time. However, sometimes a comic doesn't have a consistent creative team for quite some time. The series is usually too popular or iconic to just cancel, but there's not much desire from the more prominent creators to work on the title for an extended period of time. So, many newer writers or artists get started on their careers during periods of time like this. One of the better examples is a man by the name of Jim Starlin, who started his career at DC before shortly jumping over to Marvel Comics. He helped out the artists on Spider-Man before getting the chance to fill in on 3 issues of Iron Man. One of those issues, Iron Man number 55 from 1973 in particular, I want to talk about today for its historical importance and for being the first appearance of Thanos. The story starts with the first appearance of Drax the Destroyer as well, although he's very different from his movie counterpart, as we'll explain later on. He tries to send a telepathic message to an Earth hero to enlist their help since he's been captured, and the message ends up being received by Iron Man, who quickly tries to help before getting captured by Thanos' minions, known as the super strong Blood Brothers. From there, Drax mentally transmits information to Iron Man, and we learn the backstory of these strange aliens. They come from one of Saturn's moons, called Titan, another large departure from the films that you might be more familiar with. Beneath the surface of Titan is a hidden society where these Titans live, led by a man named Mentor and his 2 sons, Eros and Thanos. Eventually, Thanos tried to commit treason and was exiled because of it. From there, he traveled the galaxy, gaining a large following of the worst criminals in the cosmos, amassing his own army with which to take Titan for his own rule. Knowing that Thanos would come back for blood, Mentor came in contact with a cosmic god known as Kronos, the embodiment of time itself. Kronos foresees a time when even he cannot stop Thanos, and thus creates a new being, one whose sole purpose is to destroy Thanos and thwart his plans. And from the soil of Titan itself, Drax the Destroyer was born. This is an origin story that would change many times over the years, and even the fundamental aspects of Drax as a character would be changed quite a bit. Basically, all you need to know for this version is that his sole purpose in life is to kill Thanos, hence the Destroyer name, and his powers are significantly different from other versions, with the powers of flight, energy blasts, and minor telepathy. From here, Drax sought out Thanos for their first confrontation. Their battle was so explosive, both combatants exuding such immense power that the planet they fought on literally exploded. With Thanos emerging as the victor, he captured Drax, which brings us back to the present, with both heroes captured. With all the information Iron Man just received, he pulls a surprise attack and gets away to help free Drax. However, when they try to leave, they're intercepted by Thanos himself. Now that we have a good look at him, I want to talk about one of the biggest legends and accusations about Thanos, that he's based on or a ripoff of Darkseid, which is partially true. Originally, Jim Starlin, the creator of Thanos, wanted to base him off of a different character from DC's New God series called Metron. He would have been much skinnier and lankier than the iteration we're most familiar with today, and it makes a certain amount of sense given how Thanos is characterized later on, since Metron was an even more cold, calculating intellectual character than even Darkseid was. Metron was also highly associated with his Mobius chair, and similar imagery is often associated with Thanos and his various floating chairs over the years. However, when Jim Starlin brought his concepts for what Thanos would look like to his editor, Roy Thomas, Roy told him he didn't like the design. To quote Starlin's own recounting of what Roy said, "Beef 'em up. If you're gonna steal one of the new gods, at least rip off Darkseid, the really good one." So from there, Starlin gave Thanos a closer appearance to Darkseid, which probably helped the character overall. The skinnier design probably would have been more unique, but the bulkier Darkseid-esque look helped to make him more physically imposing. There's also some other big differences between Darkseid and Thanos, but I'll get into that later. Back to the story at hand, with some help from Thanos' father, Mentor, Iron Man and Drax are freed and a large fight breaks out. It's soon revealed that Thanos has escaped and left a robot double to deal with the heroes, though it is summarily defeated along with the Blood Brothers. The story ends with Drax and Iron Man saying their goodbyes, swearing to help each other defeat Thanos and any other villain that stands in their way. As an introductory issue for both Thanos and Drax, I'd say this is pretty good. I wouldn't call it great, there's not that much that changes in the grand scheme of things, but giving us some, at the time, new and interesting characters, this book does a decent job. We get the basics of the mythology around Titan itself, and an idea of how scary Thanos is as a villain. I mean, getting an entire planet blown up in your first appearance? That's not bad. Largely where this issue falters is just when it comes to Iron Man himself. There's not really much for him to do besides a lot of fighting. Nothing really to tie his own character or psychology to any of this, nor a specific tech-related problem that only somebody like him could solve. However, compared to many other one-and-done stories around this time, I'd consider it at least above average, if not pretty good, and Starlin's artwork helps a lot, providing good fluid motion for an issue mostly filled with action scenes. It's also interesting from a historical perspective because they were clearly trying to figure out a lot of this stuff along the way. Most notably the skin color of Mentor and Eros, Thanos' closest family. In every later appearance, they basically look Caucasian-ish. Here, they're just purple like Thanos. Granted, not as wrinkly as him. They also gave Drax a blue costume on the cover, while in the comic he has a purple costume. Interesting color choices all around, I'd say. From there, it took a while for Thanos to appear again. Starlin was given the assignment to take over the Captain Marvel title. But before we get to his contributions, there's a little history we need to go over regarding Captain Marvel himself. When Captain Marvel first appeared, he was a soldier in the Kree Empire, basically an empire that spans an entire galaxy. Mar-Vell was sent to Earth in an attempt to try to conquer it and see what kind of culture that the people on Earth had. When he discovered that they were relatively a peaceful race on a cosmic scale, he started to doubt his superior officer's intentions. From there, he went back to his superior officer Yon-Rogg and ultimately started a fight with him after Yon-Rogg decided to kill him for questioning the Kree Empire and wanting to conquer Earth. Mar-Vell's girlfriend was caught during the conflict and was ultimately killed. This pushed Mar-Vell over the edge, and he ultimately decided to stay on Earth as one of its many protectors, since he was mistaken for a superhero anyway with a name very similar sounding to Captain Marvel. He had many adventures before he was eventually thrown into the negative zone, basically a pocket dimension. Meanwhile, back on Earth, a guy named Rick Jones had found something called the Nega Bands, which were these special bracelets. Rick Jones had originally appeared in the Hulk title before transitioning over to the Captain America book where he became Cap's new sidekick. He was the second Bucky. Then he was transitioned over to the Captain Marvel title where he found the Nega Bands. After putting them on and touching the two bands together, he was able to switch places with Captain Marvel. The two of them eventually decided to work together in order to help protect the Earth, and now Captain Marvel, with expanded power set and a different costume, became Marvel's latest and pretty much only cosmic hero at the time. From there, Jim Starlin takes over the book, and this is the status quo that he was left with. Starlin's first issue begins with Captain Marvel being assaulted by a number of aliens, who are trying to harass him for some reason. Eventually the aliens just up and disappear, and Captain Marvel decides to investigate later as he has other personal matters to deal with. He switches back into Rick Jones, and Rick goes to see his love interest at the time, Luann. When he arrives, he sees that Luann's uncle has been murdered, with a police officer following not too far behind. The officer believes that Rick is the one that killed the old man, and Luann shows up only to confirm that Rick was the one that killed him. From there, the police officer does take Rick away, but he doesn't seem to take him to a police station. Rick then uses his powers to transform back into Captain Marvel, where he's immediately assaulted by Yon-Rogg, a superior officer from his origin story, and he's also assaulted by Ronan the Accuser, one of the highest-ranking officers in the entire Kree Empire. He's then confronted with basically every villain he's fought up to this point, including Namor the Submariner and the Hulk. With so many villains coming after him and his whole life seeming to fall apart, Captain Marvel and Rick Jones are eventually defeated by all of the villains. After he's effectively knocked out, the villains reveal themselves as actually being Skrulls, who are a shape-shifting alien race. They reveal that they have properly captured Captain Marvel for some kind of master that they're working for. Eventually, Captain Marvel reveals that he was only pretending to be knocked out. From there, the Skrulls decide to run away since they no longer have the element of surprise, and are ultimately able to flee from Captain Marvel's grasp. After losing the Skrulls, Captain Marvel decides to go and confront Luann about falsely accusing Rick Jones of murder. She reveals that she's been implanted with some kind of controlling device. It can only control specific words and actions, but she's forced under the influence of these control devices until they can find some way to get them off of her. It's just then that she's controlled into trying to assassinate Captain Marvel, but he's able to disarm her pretty quickly, and he decides the best thing to do is to try to investigate and see if there's any way that he can get these control discs off of her. Back with the Skrulls, we see them scheming, and Super Skrull in particular, a Skrull with shape-shifting powers and with the powers of all members of the Fantastic Four, decides that he's going to trick the Thing, one of the members of the Fantastic Four, into fighting Captain Marvel. And I love how Thing is just so utterly gullible and decides to go along with it even though he knows it's a trap. Why, that crummy rat, he's gotta be setting me up for a trap, and if he thinks I'm gonna fall for it, he's freaking right. The Thing goes to the pre-selected location and he's hit by a laser that is able to take away his voice. Captain Marvel is also tricked to this location and ultimately ends up fighting the Thing, now thinking that the Thing is actually a Skrull, and since the Thing can't speak, there's no way to really clear up the situation, so they end up fighting each other. The Skrulls are watching this all the while and specifically hoping that Captain Marvel is merely knocked out for some reason. Eventually, the Thing's vocal paralysis wears off, and the leader of the Skrulls decides to take out his punishment on one of them, eventually revealing himself as Thanos, the true leader of this cause, and a mysterious hooded figure, but we'll get back to them later. Thanos is able to easily brush aside both the Thing and Captain Marvel and ultimately captures Rick Jones, after forcibly switching his place with Captain Marvel. Thanos then teleports everybody except for the Thing back to his home moon of Titan. From there, he implants devices on Rick Jones's unconscious body, trying to find some kind of information that's hidden deep inside of his subconscious. That information is the location of the Cosmic Cube. The Cosmic Cube is a reality warping device that originally appeared in the Captain America series. It functions a little differently than it does in the movies, where it can warp reality and it can grant basically any wish you want, but it does eventually run out of power, but it has so much power that for most people, whatever their wishes are, it basically can grant. So Thanos learns the location of the Cosmic Cube. Meanwhile, Rick is actually able to escape and is able to find Thanos' father Mentor and his brother Eros. Together, the three of them decide to team up. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Luann is able to contact the Avengers by using Rick Jones's Avengers ID card, and is able to tell them about this whole ordeal with Thanos and the control discs. Back on Titan, Captain Marvel, Mentor, and Eros are able to stage a new rebellion against Thanos and his forces. They are able to take back some of the planet, but not too much of it. There is an alien entity that seems to be trying to contact Captain Marvel, and at the same time, his warrior instincts seem to take over once again from his Kree soldier days, and he seems to have a special anger inside of him, which is very unlike his more recent appearances. After having helped liberate part of Titan, Captain Marvel bids his farewell from Mentor and Eros and decides to go back to Earth and meet up with the Avengers. From there, he tells them the rest of Thanos' plan, including his plan to use the Cosmic Cube to either take over or destroy Earth itself. Iron Man takes Captain Marvel aside so that they can analyze the control disc that was on Luann. Iron Man says it's familiar to him, but he's not exactly sure. As this is happening, the other Avengers are being picked off one by some kind of shadowy figure. Eventually, Cap and Iron Man realize that they're being taken out, and by the time Iron Man's taken out, they finally reveal that the figure is a character known as the Controller, a former Iron Man villain. Basically, his power is that he has these control discs that he can put onto people, and those control discs then not only give him control over them, at least minor control, he can also take power from them, and so he's taken power from hundreds, if not thousands of people, all into himself, basically making him powerful enough even to take on the Avengers and Captain Marvel. Meanwhile, in a special cave that the Cosmic Cube has been hidden in, Thanos and Drax confront each other. Drax has come to thwart Thanos' plan to take the Cosmic Cube. Thanos decides, instead of doing a physical confrontation this time, they are going to attack each other's minds telepathically. This is where we really see Jim Starlin's artwork shine, as we see all these trippy, bizarre images that he would become famous for. Within the mindscape, the two of them fight each other, even traveling into Drax's id. Thanos attempts to drive Drax insane, but ultimately he only succeeds in knocking him out. This still leads him to his ultimate goal, which is control over the Cosmic Cube, which he now has. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel attempts to deal with the Controller, but the Controller is able to easily handle Captain Marvel and demolishes Avengers headquarters, pinning Rick Jones underneath the rubble as he kidnaps the still-controlled Luann. Rick Jones attempts to transform back into Captain Marvel, but no matter how many times he uses his wristbands, it still doesn't work. Rick Jones laments that the Avengers have been defeated, the Controller has Luann, Thanos has the Cosmic Cube, and now Captain Marvel is seemingly gone. Meanwhile, in the negative zone, we see that the reason that Captain Marvel is trapped is because he has been captured by the entity that we saw before. But he seems to want to help Mar-Vell.
Know you, Captain Marvel of the Kree, we have summoned you here in full awareness of the threat of Thanos. In fact, that is our reason, for to combat a universal poison, a universal antidote must be prepared. You are that antidote, Kree. But in order to ready that antidote, Mar-Vell the soldier must die.
Now, the creature explains that he is the cosmic being Eon, who's tasked with great cosmic purpose. He explains the backstory of Thanos and his people, that at one point they lived on Mount Olympus, not unlike the Greek gods themselves, and eventually Kronos, the god of time we saw earlier, he was accidentally transformed into a cosmic god of time that we see now. They also explain that Kronos' brother, who would eventually become Mentor, ends up leading those people to the moon of Titan. Later on in Marvel history, they'll eventually explain this whole race of Titans as actually being an offshoot of the Eternals, who are sort of offshoots of early humanity, genetically engineered by a race of beings called the Celestials. Back in the present, Captain Marvel questions Eon's intent. "Why are you torturing me so?"
Because knowledge is torture, and there must be awareness before there is change. That we know because we were created to know. Kronos knew that neither Titan nor he himself could muster the power to stop Thanos. So Kronos created us to wait for you, for Kronos hoped that skill might win over raw power, skill that you must obtain. We are here to give you that skill. With it, you will have a slim chance of challenging Thanos' might. Without it, all is lost. You have lived and accepted the ways of the warrior. The universe now needs not a warrior, but a protector. He who seeks to protect must first love, and there is no love in war. Do you know war, Mar-Vell? This is war, destruction on an insanely gigantic scale, perpetrated by man against man. Man gives many reasons for battle, but can one truly believe that any cause is worth all the blood that war spills? Is it worth the dead, the crippled, the lost? Answer us, Mar-Vell!
Eon then continues to interrogate Mar-Vell about his past, about honor, and about love, including his love for his former girlfriend who had been killed by his superior officer Yon-Rogg. I believe it's also important to note that Jim Starlin himself had actually been in war. His comics career only started after he came back from Vietnam. He had also studied quite extensively mythology and psychology as he was taking this job. Combine that with the heavy influence of Steve Ditko's artwork, specifically his work on Doctor Strange, he's able to mix this all into this great character study and really change Captain Mar-Vell over the course of only a single issue, which is quite impressive. "I've spent my life fighting for that which I believed in, my world, my leaders, and have been wrong, terribly wrong. I wish to change.
With the wish comes the reality, because as capable as we are of physically changing you, the mental change has to come from within. You have become aware. Our task is now to expand that awareness, to sharpen already keen senses, to tighten hair trigger reflexes. Let us grant you an abundance of humility and a touch of grandeur. Allow us to subtly change you so that you may survive the hard road ahead.
After accepting the role of the protector rather than the role of the warrior, we see Captain Marvel change and his context change overall as well. I really like how Jim Starlin plays with that dichotomy in a similar way to how they play with that dichotomy with his name, because his original name, of course, is Mar-Vell, and he's just a captain in the Kree Empire, and they changed it again to Captain Marvel, which sounds like a superhero name. They parallel that idea with the idea that Mar-Vell changing from warrior to protector, which makes it this really interesting thing about identity. Similar to how his name has changed, they parallel that with his identity change from warrior to protector. And with that, he now gains cosmic awareness. Basically, it's a new power. It kind of functions like spider sense, actually, where he's now aware of things around him, but it works even further than spider sense because now he can be aware of things on a cosmic scale. He can be aware of massive changes in the cosmology or the changes in solar systems and galaxies. He can be aware of planets exploding in the cosmos, and he can also use it as basically like normal spider sense for Spider-Man, where he can sense minor changes around him or if danger is nearby. Now, it does have the same weakness as spider sense, where he could be distracted or ignore his own senses, and the cosmic awareness also gives him awareness of his own weaknesses, which allows him to fight even better as well.
The metamorphosis nears completion. A baptism of blood is the final step.
But you claimed I would change. A few alterations of my costume? My hair now blonde. Not much of a change.
You see, but you do not understand. How is it you know your hair is blonde without gazing in a mirror? We have enhanced your total reception to life. You have become aware. No movement too slight to see, no sound too low to hear, no smell too faint to detect. For all things in the universe are now one with you. This same universe now needs protection, a Herculean task.
And to prove that he truly has changed, Captain Marvel gets into a fight with all of his former villains in this mindscape. Thanks to his cosmic powers, he's able to have faster reflexes and be able to deal with all of them pretty efficiently. But in the end, he has to face one more foe, himself. This is your cancerous other self. He is your hostility, your battle lust. The side of you which loves destruction, perpetuates hate, and seeks death. He is your personal Thanos. To truly live, you must overcome this within yourself. After defeating his own shadow self, Eon lets Captain Marvel go, and now trading places with Rick Jones finally, he goes after the Controller. Mar-Vell eventually tracks down the Controller, who is currently holding a rally of all the people he controls. The two of them get into a fight, but now with Marvel's newfound power and perception, the fight is much more even. In fact, the fight eventually leans more in Marvel's favor before Thanos intervenes. Having seen the whole exchange through the Cosmic Cube, he kills the Controller for being unable to defeat Marvel, but lets Marvel live as he doesn't quite understand the changes Cap has gone through yet, and wants to know more. From here we get a few crossover issues from other series, which is pretty interesting historically since this story predates most crossover event comics, yet has a similar structure to those later stories. The first covers the Thing and Iron Man stopping the Blood Brothers in an issue of Marvel 2-in-1. Then there's a whole Daredevil arc that introduces the character Moondragon, a woman with immense telepathic powers. Moondragon and Captain Marvel then return to the Captain Marvel book afterwards, where they meet up with Drax and the Avengers to plan their assault against Thanos. Meanwhile, Thanos speaks to the mysterious hooded figure, telling her that he has secretly been spying on the heroes through the Cosmic Cube, and conquering Earth is not his true intention. It's merely a stepping stone to his true goal, a gift for his true love, the cosmic entity and the hooded figure herself, Mistress Death. A woman who seems to be unable to speak, but with unimaginable domain over the dead. Now, it's important to emphasize that in Marvel cosmology you have many different kinds of gods. There are the sky gods, like Thor and Hercules, gods that are of specific worlds, realms, and pantheons. They may be powerful, but in the greater cosmic landscape in the universe itself, they're still pretty small. However, above the sky gods are the cosmic gods, or the cosmic abstracts as they're sometimes known. The cosmic gods are the true representatives of specific ideas or concepts made into immensely powerful beings on an incomprehensible scale. We've already seen one of these beings earlier in the story with Kronos, the god of time, but now we have Mistress Death, the embodiment of death itself. And when I say embodiment, I don't mean she merely has power over death. I mean she's literally the idea of death in the form of a person. These are metaphysical concepts made literal. It's also important to note that Thanos is named after the Greek god of death, Thanatos. He's also named after something else, but that's not important right now. Thanos, using the Cosmic Cube, teleports all the heroes with the most knowledge on him to his location, including Mentor, Eros, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, Moondragon, and Drax. From there, he explains his plans of galactic conquest in the name of death, and how Earth is merely the first step in his new unholy rule. He goes on to boast that their homeworlds will be taken over through the power of both the Cosmic Cube and Thanos' armadas of starships. And to prove how undefeatable he is, he reveals that he has captured Kronos, the cosmic god of time himself, shackling his limbs to entire stars. As Thanos boasts of his victory, Captain Marvel strains to bring his wrists together, using all of his strength. Eventually he gets his bands to touch, switching his place with Rick Jones, and releasing enough energy to free all the heroes from their shackles. A fight breaks out as everybody tries to keep the cube away from Thanos, everybody throwing everything they have at him. Moondragon even attempts her own telepathic battle with Thanos, but ultimately they all fail. After retrieving the cube again, Thanos decides to use the cube to make a more permanent change. Now do you realize the true genius of the Titan called Thanos? Only he could have gained the cosmic cube and thought to order it to change him into all things in the universe. Thus exit Thanos the man, enter Thanos the god. With Thanos now taking the form of a cosmic god the size of the universe itself, he scatters the heroes, picking them off one at a time until only Captain Marvel and Iron Man remain. With a moment of quiet, the two attempt to plan a counterattack against the seemingly omnipotent Thanos. They have the cube, but Thanos apparently used up all its powers, so Marvel pockets it before theorizing further. He flaunted his space fleet that was headed toward Earth to waste mankind. Now I call that rubbing salt into a wound. I don't think it was sadism. I think it was boasting, like when he showed us how he had imprisoned Kronos, the Supreme Titan. Why, instead of killing us when we escaped, did he merely disable us, so that we had to witness his transformation? Thanos wanted an audience, someone to feed his ego, someone to see him change into and gain control of the entire universe and everything in it. What fun is there in becoming a god, if there is no one to watch? The two of them head for the supercomputer on Titan, trying to figure out how to use Thanos' ego against him. As they arrive, they're suddenly attacked by demons spawned from the floor. They attack both heroes, but mostly gang up on Iron Man, knocking him out, leaving Captain Marvel to fend for himself. Although he quickly realizes that the demons probably were only programmed by Thanos to attack Cap, so he switches Rick Jones back in, and the demons leave them alone. Rick Jones has the computer on Titan teleport him to Earth. Thanos soon follows, and Rick Jones tries to provoke him, trying to use his own ego against him. Well, well, if it isn't the divine baboon. Watch it, Rick. Don't get angry at him. Angry? You can only get angry at someone you respect. You inconsequential dust mote! Yeah? And you're so big? You never scrapped with Captain Marvel yourself except when Titan was falling apart around him. I think you're chicken. Probably not the greatest plan ever, but it's kind of worth it to see Thanos get called a chicken. Thanos decides to take on physical form, and Rick switches back to Captain Marvel as he begins his fight with Thanos, and he's soon joined by Drax. The two are able to defeat his temporary physical body, but Thanos takes on his ethereal cosmic form again, and Drax attempts to fight him off as Captain Marvel again tries to strategize. But how can you stop a god? How can somebody even have hope to stop somebody without a physical form? Well, think back to earlier in the story. Marvel theorized that the solution had something to do with Thanos' ego, which makes sense since Thanos got the Cosmic Cube about halfway through the story, and could have instantly won the second he got his hands on it. but he didn't. He didn't have an audience to prove what he'd accomplished. But that's still not quite it either. Remember back when Mar-Vell was getting his cosmic awareness? When he was proving to Eon that he was worthy? What was the language they used? You must defeat your own personal Thanos. Thanos' name is not just a reference to a Greek god of death. Thanos' name also refers to a psychological phenomenon called the Thanatos complex, also known as the death drive, or even the death of the ego. The phenomenon basically describes a need for death or self-destruction. It's the nagging part of your ego that says you don't deserve what you have, that you deserve to fail and suffer. Remember how earlier Mar-Vell was talking about Thanos boasting to the heroes for egotistical purposes? That's basically true. He had an audience there, not to convince them that he'd won, but to convince himself. That's why Mar-Vell had to defeat his own Thanos, his own Darkseid earlier. He has no doubts about his own goal or purpose. He's completely at peace with himself, now that he's a protector instead of a warrior. But Thanos? He knows what he's doing is wrong and insane, even if only on a subconscious level. He still thinks of himself as a warrior, but he's also unhappy and doesn't know why. That's why Mar-Vell had to grow from warrior to protector, because he went on a personal journey that Thanos himself has been unable to. This is also paralleled with Drax as he continues to fight Thanos as a warrior, not understanding his own psyche or Thanos's. Even now, as Mar-Vell realizes the reality of Thanos' own psyche, he realizes that Thanos' subconscious gave him one last boon. Thanos threw away the cosmic cube earlier like it was nothing, when in reality, his godlike form actually subsists off the power from the cube. Captain Marvel reaches for the cube, shattering it, breaking any powers it may have had, reverting reality back to normal, and seemingly killing Thanos in the process. Again, Thanos' own death drive, his own Thanatos complex, comes into play here, as he could have instantly teleported Captain Marvel away, or even killed him outright before he could actually reach the cube, but instead he dances around it, only aging him up temporarily. From there, the Avengers clean up after the invasion of Thanos' forces, and Eros and Mentor go back to Titan to both relax and also rebuild what is left of Titan society. Overall, I'd say this story is pretty good. It's one of my favorite books from the 70s. The writing is fantastic, as I feel that Mar-Vell has a really great arc in this book, and Thanos is a perfect parallel, a great static character to contrast Mar-Vell with as we see his journey. The artwork is also really well done and amazingly imaginative. It always puts me in this really interesting headspace with how trippy and weird it is. It actually sort of helps to connect with the characters with how strange the whole book is, as they have to go through all of these bizarre sequences. Again, I would highly recommend this title, and you can find this arc in a book called Avengers vs. Thanos, which is a pretty popular trade at this point. It should not be very hard to find. It also includes part of the next Thanos arc that we'll talk about later. But this end is only the beginning of something much larger. In my next video, we'll cover the origin of Adam Warlock, a key player in the ongoing story of Thanos and his influence, as we go through the entire original Infinity Saga. So make sure you like and subscribe so you can see the next parts of this series, as well as other series that I do on this channel. Support me on Patreon to get exclusive content and keep this channel running, and follow me on Twitter to get the latest updates on my videos. Thanks for watching.